He slammed the glass table so hard the sound cracked through the boardroom. Who let her in here? All eyes turned. She stood by the door, holding a stack of files too tightly, like if she loosened her grip, they would fall, and with them whatever little dignity she had left in this room. I asked a question, he snapped, rising slowly. His voice was calm, but his eyes weren't. Or have we started hiring just anyone now? A few executives chuckled under their breath. She swallowed, stepped forward, and placed the files gently on the table. The financial projections you requested, sir? He didn't even look at them. Instead, he looked at her shoes. One, two, dust clinging to the edges. Then her clothes. Plain. Forgettable. Then her face. Next time, he said, his tone dropping into something colder, send someone who belongs in a room like this. Laughter spread wider this time. Her fingers tightened at her sides. But she didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She simply met his eyes and said quietly, "You're right." He smirked, already turning away. Not for long. The room fell silent for half a second, but he didn't catch it. He was already too busy dismissing her. And that was his first mistake. By the time the meeting ended, the damage was done. Not to the company, not to the numbers, but to something far more dangerous. Pride. He walked out of the boardroom with his usual confidence, surrounded by people eager to agree with everything he said. Schedule the investors for Friday, he ordered. And make sure legal is ready. I want this acquisition closed before the quarter ends. Yes, sir. Of course, sir. Everyone nodded. Everyone followed. No one questioned him. Except one person. And she was already gone. Downstairs, in a quiet hallway no one important ever used, she leaned against the wall and exhaled slowly. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was controlled. But her eyes held something entirely different. Not anger. Not pain. Something sharper. Something patient. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then answered. Yes. A voice on the other end spoke quickly, professionally. We've secured another 8% through the shell accounts. No one has traced it back. She closed her eyes for a brief second. Good. Keep going. And the board? They'll fall in line, she said calmly. They always do. There was a pause. Are you sure you want to proceed now? After today? She opened her eyes. I was sure long before today. She ended the call. Then she pushed herself off the wall, straightened her posture, and walked back into the building like nothing had happened. Like she was still just the quiet girl no one noticed. Upstairs he was already moving on. He always did. People were temporary. Power was permanent. At least that's what he believed. Get me the report from earlier, he said as he entered his office. His assistant hesitated. The one she brought? He frowned slightly. Who? The girl from the meeting. He waved a dismissive hand. Anyone else could have delivered it. I don't want mistakes attached to important work. She didn't make a mistake, sir. The numbers actually. I said I don't want it, he cut in sharply. Silence. Then a quiet, yes, sir. The assistant left. And just like that, the most important document in the building was ignored, simply because of who brought it. Hours later, long after the offices began to empty, she was still there. But not where anyone expected. Not cleaning. Not filing. Not doing any of the small, invisible tasks people assumed defined her life. She was in a locked conference room. Alone. Her laptop glowed in the dim light. Numbers filled the screen. Charts. Percentages. Ownership structures so complex they would take most people days to understand. She navigated through them effortlessly. Click. Another file opened. Click. Another transfer confirmed. Her phone buzzed again. This time she didn't hesitate. Talk to me. The last block of shares is available, the voice said. But it won't stay that way for long. How much? Enough to push you over. She leaned back slightly, her expression unreadable. And him? He has no idea. A small smile touched her lips. Perfect. The next morning the company buzzed with energy. Big deal. Big investors. Big expectations. He stood at the center of it all, exactly where he believed he belonged. Today changes everything, he told his team. By this time next week we'll be twice as powerful. They nodded. They believed him. Why wouldn't they? He had never failed before. Across the building she watched from a distance. Not hidden. Just unnoticed. There's a difference. People ignore what they don't value. And right now no one valued her. That was fine. It made everything easier. The meeting started without her. But it wouldn't end that way. Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere was electric. Investors sat around the table. Lawyers lined the walls. Screens displayed projections. Everything was perfect. Everything was under control. He stood at the head of the table, confident, composed, completely certain of the outcome. "Gentlemen," he began, "what we're about to do today will set a new standard in this industry." A few nods. A few impressed looks. He continued, feeding off the attention. "This company, my company, has been built on precision, strength, and vision." He paused, letting the words sink in. "And today we take it even further." The doors opened. No one turned at first. Why would they? People walked in and out all the time. But then the footsteps didn't stop. They didn't hurry. They didn't hesitate. They carried authority. One by one, heads began to turn. And then, silence. Because she wasn't dressed the same anymore. And this time, she wasn't alone. She stepped into the boardroom, calm, confident, every movement measured. Gone was the plain uniform everyone had mocked. In its place, tailored elegance, subtle but undeniable power. Her eyes scanned the room, and for the first time, the billionaire noticed her, not just as an annoyance, but as a presence that commanded attention. "Is this some kind of joke?" he said, voice tight but trying to mask it. What are you doing here?" She smiled slightly, almost pityingly. "I've always been here, haven't I?" He frowned. "I don't." "You've underestimated me since the day I walked into this building," she interrupted, calm but cutting. "And it's cost you more than you can imagine." The board members shifted uncomfortably. The air changed. People whispered quietly to each other. Something was off. The confident billionaire, the man everyone had followed blindly, now seemed unsure. "Who are you really?" he demanded, leaning forward on the polished table. "I am the majority shareholder," she said simply, letting the weight of the words sink in. "And effective immediately, I will be taking over operations. Your decisions, your deals, your authority, they all go through me now." Murmurs spread across the room. Lawyers checked their documents. Phones buzzed. He took a step back, suddenly seeing the entire picture. The numbers she had handled, the silent transfers, the shell accounts he had ignored as irrelevant. You can't do this," he said, disbelief shaking his voice. "Oh, I already did," she replied smoothly. "And while you were busy humiliating me, ignoring me, and believing your pride was untouchable, I quietly prepared for this moment. You spent years building a kingdom. I simply ensured I controlled the keys." His fists clenched. This is theft. Fraud. "Legally?" she asked. "Everything is above board. Financially, I am untouchable. You were always careless with your arrogance. That's the gap I filled." One of his senior executives leaned forward. "Sir, she's right. The ownership records, they're all valid." His eyes darted around the room. Faces he had trusted now looked uncertain, cautious. Fear lingered beneath their respect for him. "This can't be happening," he muttered, almost to himself. "I warned you," she said softly. "Not for long, you said. And yet here we are." He lunged toward the table, slamming his palm down, trying to regain control. "I built this company. Everything in this room is mine. You have nothing." She didn't flinch. Instead, she took a step closer. "Everything in this room belongs to the person who respects it and understands it. And that, unfortunately for you, is me." A long silence fell. The air was heavy with tension. Then she raised a hand slightly, signaling the lawyers. Documents were passed around. Confirmation emails appeared on laptops. Every single shareholder, every minor investor had validated her claims. The billionaire felt the walls close in. This wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't a battle he could win with charm or anger. This was a total reversal, and it had been orchestrated quietly, meticulously, flawlessly. You played me," he said finally, voice low, almost broken. "Why?" She paused, looking him directly in the eyes. "Because you needed to see what happens when someone believes in themselves quietly, while you only believe in your own power. Because arrogance is fragile and pride is dangerous." He sank into his chair, defeated, watching as she smiled, not maliciously, but with the satisfaction of someone who had been patient for years. "You think this changes everything," he said finally, almost to himself. "It does," she said. "Because power without respect is meaningless. And respect, sir, is something I command now." He tried to speak again, but she had already begun to issue orders. Emails were sent. Decisions made. Meetings scheduled. Her presence dominated the room, yet she remained calm, letting the weight of her authority sink in naturally. The former billionaire CEO sat back, realizing for the first time that being feared is not the same as being respected. Fear evaporates under pressure, but respect, earned and unshakable, remains. She turned slightly to the board, her voice clear. Effective immediately, all strategic decisions will go through me. Any attempts to bypass this process will be considered insubordination. No one spoke. The room waited. The silence stretched until finally, a nod came from the most senior executive. One by one, others followed. The man who had once commanded obedience now sat in disbelief, stripped of authority, stripped of the empire he thought was untouchable. And yet, in that moment, something shifted within him. Perhaps it was humility. Perhaps it was the faintest recognition of the woman who had outplayed him at every turn. She approached him slowly. "There is still a place for you here," she said softly. "If you can learn to respect others and understand the value of true leadership. But make no mistake, this company is mine now." He looked up at her, the fire in his eyes replaced with resignation, tinged with something almost like awe. You're brilliant," he admitted quietly. "Brilliant isn't enough," she replied. "Patience, preparation, and understanding power, that's what makes the difference." He exhaled heavily, leaning back in his chair. "I never saw it coming. Because you never looked beyond yourself," she said. A quiet laugh escaped her lips, not cruelly but with relief and triumph. She had endured humiliation, invisibility, and doubt, yet she had emerged not only victorious but stronger than ever. She stepped back, surveying the room. Every executive, every lawyer, every investor now acknowledged her as the authority. A new order had begun. And for the first time in years, the billionaire CEO understood that he had underestimated the one person who could outmaneuver him completely. She turned to leave the room, pausing at the door. Her gaze flicked back toward him one last time. "Remember this moment," she said softly. "Never underestimate someone you consider small, because they might just be the one who takes everything from you." The doors closed behind her. Silence lingered for a heartbeat, then whispers began, tentative at first, growing into a recognition that a new era had begun. He remained in his chair, staring at the empty space where she had stood, the weight of reality settling in. Everything he thought he controlled was gone. And yet, in that moment he felt something new. The challenge of starting over, of learning respect, of perhaps finally understanding the true meaning of power. Meanwhile, she walked down the hall, composed, every step echoing with confidence. The empire she had quietly prepared for was now fully in her hands. Her mind was already racing with plans, decisions to make, people to empower, strategies to execute. Every move was deliberate, every choice calculated. She had waited, observed, and now finally acted. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at it and smiled faintly. Messages confirming shareholder approvals, transfers, and legal validations. Every single detail had been accounted for. She exhaled, feeling the satisfaction of victory, but not for arrogance, not for revenge. She had acted with precision, intelligence, and patience. And in doing so, she had transformed her invisibility into absolute influence. The building seemed quieter now, though the energy was unmistakable. The shift in power was complete, but the work ahead was only beginning. She would lead with strength, wisdom, and a respect for those who, like her, had been underestimated. And somewhere deep in her mind, she knew this was only the beginning. She paused briefly, and to the audience watching this story unfold, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because the story doesn't end here. The power, the patience, and the play will continue, and you'll want to see every move she makes. He stepped out of the boardroom later, shoulders slumped, mind spinning. The empire he had built with his own hands was now, effectively, someone else's. Every familiar corner, every familiar desk, every familiar assistant, all of it now operated under her authority. The realization hit like a blow he couldn't parry. He walked down the hall, past employees who avoided eye contact, whispers following him like shadows. The arrogance that had carried him through countless negotiations and conquests was gone, replaced with a creeping sense of vulnerability. He had underestimated someone he thought inconsequential, and now everything he held dear had slipped through his fingers. Meanwhile, she was back in her office, but it wasn't the small, forgotten corner she had occupied before. This was her space now. A new desk, new equipment, every detail arranged exactly how she wanted it. Yet she didn't pause to admire the material changes. There was work to be done. Every department needed restructuring, and she had a clear vision for how it would unfold. She picked up the phone. Call marketing, legal, and finance. I want all teams aligned. Any misalignment will be addressed immediately. Her voice was calm, yet there was an edge that carried authority. "Yes, ma'am," the voice on the other end replied almost reverently. She hung up, then leaned back, fingers steepled. Her mind ran through every scenario she had prepared for months. Each decision had been meticulously calculated, each investment strategically timed. Every move she had made, every quiet action, had led to this precise moment. But victory wasn't enough. She wanted assurance. Assurance that no one, not even him, could ever undermine her authority. Across the hall he entered his old office, now eerily quiet. He ran his hands over the desk, imagining it was still his domain. The phone rang and he almost didn't pick it up. Finally he answered. "Sir," said the voice cautiously, "the board, they're expecting your input on the new strategy." He froze, realizing the bitter truth. He no longer dictated the strategy. Every decision would pass through her, and while he still had knowledge and experience, the control, the power, was no longer his. I understand," he said finally, his voice hollow. He hung up and stared at the blank screen before him. A memory surfaced. The first day she walked into the company, quiet, unnoticed, polite. He had looked at her with disdain, assuming she was nothing. He remembered mocking her in meetings, dismissing her contributions, even questioning why she deserved to be anywhere near the boardroom. All those moments now felt like mistakes written in ink he could never erase. The next day she convened a meeting with all senior executives. She entered, confident but not intimidating. She let her presence speak before she uttered a word. "Good morning," she said. "We have a lot to accomplish and no time to waste. I expect full cooperation, and I will ensure every department aligns with our vision immediately." The executives nodded, some still glancing at him to gauge his reaction. He remained silent, the weight of his defeat pressing down on him. One of the executives cleared their throat. "Ma'am, regarding the merger negotiations, some investors are concerned about recent leadership changes." She didn't flinch. "Then we reassure them. Schedule one-on-one calls. Explain the strategy and the reasoning behind every decision. Confidence is contagious. If they see our certainty, they'll follow it." Another executive hesitated. "And the CEO's role?" She turned slightly to him, her eyes locking with his. "He will assist where necessary, but the final authority lies with me. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am," they said in unison. A small, almost imperceptible smile appeared on her lips. The first test of power had been met, and everyone had acquiesced without resistance. Later she walked the office floor, observing quietly. Employees avoided her gaze, some whispering to each other. She had always been unnoticed, but now, invisible had become powerful. Every small action she had taken in the shadows, correcting mistakes, optimizing processes, quietly assisting colleagues, had built credibility she had never flaunted. And now, it all converged into undeniable authority. He approached her cautiously in the hallway. "Can we talk?" His voice lacked its usual force. She stopped and looked at him. "Of course," she said, neutral, leaving the tone open but firm. He gestured to a quiet corner. I want to understand. How did you do it? How did you gain control?" She met his gaze evenly. "By being patient. By observing. By knowing that arrogance blinds people. You believed only in your own power. I believed in mine, quietly, methodically, strategically. Every action I took was calculated to ensure I was ready when the time came." He shook his head, struggling to comprehend. "I never thought I was invisible to you," she finished. "That was my advantage. You underestimated what you didn't value." He ran a hand through his hair. "And all this, the board, the investors, they just followed you?" "They followed confidence, preparation, and proof. I didn't need to yell, threaten, or intimidate. I just ensured that the facts, the numbers, and the strategy aligned with my authority. Power backed by preparation is irresistible." For a moment he was silent. A bitter, almost humbling realization washed over him. The empire he had thought unassailable had been overtaken not by someone stronger, but by someone smarter and patient enough to wait for the perfect moment. She stepped closer, lowering her voice slightly. "There's still a place for you here if you're willing to learn, to respect, to contribute. But make no mistake, I am in charge. Any attempt to undermine that will be met with immediate consequences." He nodded slowly, the fire in his eyes replaced with grudging respect. I understand." A soft smile touched her lips. "Good. Now let's get to work." Later that evening, after the last emails had been sent and confirmations made, she leaned back in her chair. Her eyes scanned the room, the empty hallways, the lights still on in a few offices. She allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction, knowing she had not only seized power but had done so flawlessly. Her phone buzzed again. Notifications of completed transfers, approvals, and confirmations from all departments. She smiled faintly. The pieces were in place. Every department aligned. Every key stakeholder accounted for. Her patience had paid off. She stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city skyline. The building that had once been his fortress now symbolized her victory, not in arrogance but in mastery and control. And then she remembered the audience. The viewers who would follow her story, who would see how patience, intelligence, and quiet determination could overturn assumptions, crush arrogance, and seize authority. She picked up her phone, tapping a message to the camera crew already capturing the story. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. This story is just beginning. Her smile widened as she turned away from the window, ready to begin the work of transformation, knowing full well that true power is measured not by how much you control, but by how effectively you execute when everyone expects nothing from you. He returned to the boardroom the next morning, not as the billionaire CEO, but as a man learning humility. The chairs he had once occupied without question were now hers, and every glance toward the executives reminded him that authority had shifted irrevocably. Yet he moved with caution, knowing confrontation would achieve nothing, at least not yet. She entered calmly, coffee in hand, her posture exuding quiet dominance. The executives looked to her, nodding in anticipation, and she smiled briefly. This was her environment now, her influence palpable even before she spoke. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady. "We have a lot to accomplish today. Let's begin with the merger updates. I expect clarity and precision from each department. Any ambiguities will be addressed immediately." "Yes, ma'am," came the chorus of responses. The acknowledgement of her authority was seamless. He watched her work, noting the fluidity of her leadership. Decisions were made quickly, issues resolved before they could escalate, and employees, previously timid, now looked at her with respect rather than fear. Every movement demonstrated the power he had ignored for so long. "Sir," she said, turning toward him without breaking her rhythm, "I'd like you to provide your insight on the international expansion plan. Your experience is invaluable, but the final decision rests with me." He nodded, swallowing pride. "Of course. I'll provide my analysis." She handed him a tablet with the latest market research. "Take your time. I want accuracy, not speed. And remember, collaboration is key. We succeed together or not at all." He exhaled, realizing for the first time that collaboration was something he had never truly practiced. His decisions had always been unilateral, driven by ego rather than strategy. Now he had to adapt or risk irrelevance. The meeting continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. Where once tension had dominated every interaction with him, there was now efficiency, focus, and mutual respect, centered entirely around her guidance. She directed the discussion, encouraged input from all sides, and validated insights where appropriate. Later, during a brief break, he approached her privately. "You've changed the entire dynamic here," he said quietly. I underestimated you. I see that now." She looked at him steadily. "You didn't underestimate me. You underestimated the consequences of underestimating someone. And that, sir, is a mistake you won't make twice." He paused, nodding slowly. "No, I won't. But, will there ever be a point where I can regain influence?" She tilted her head slightly, considering him. "Influence isn't given, it's earned. If you want to regain trust and impact, you must prove your commitment to the team, to the vision, and to respect. Anything less, and your previous position is irrelevant." He swallowed, recognizing the truth in her words. "I understand." "You will," she said, turning back toward the group as the meeting resumed. Every action reaffirmed her control. That afternoon, she called a department heads meeting. The executives gathered quickly, a hint of apprehension evident on their faces. She entered, clipboard in hand, radiating confidence. "Today," she began, "we are implementing structural changes to improve efficiency and accountability. There will be clear reporting lines, and performance metrics will be transparent across all levels. Anyone who fails to comply will be reassigned. Excellence is no longer optional." Murmurs ran through the room, but she didn't flinch. Her presence silenced doubt. "Sir," she said, looking at him briefly, "your expertise will be utilized in mentoring the international expansion teams. Your experience is valuable, but decisions rest with me." "Understood." He nodded, accepting the parameters. Pride wrestled with humility, but he knew resistance was futile. By evening, she was reviewing projections alone in her office. She paused, reflecting on the journey, how she had been overlooked, belittled, and dismissed. Every slight, every laugh at her expense had fueled her determination. She had waited, planned, and executed meticulously. And now she wasn't just recognized, she was unassailable. Her phone buzzed with notifications. Investors confirmed their confidence in her strategy. Legal approvals were complete. Departments had aligned seamlessly. Everything was in motion exactly as she had designed. A small smile formed. Victory wasn't just taking control, it was transforming the system around her. She had turned invisibility into power, patience into strategy, and oversight into dominance. Her phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen. A message appeared, "The team is ready for the next phase. Shall we proceed?" She typed back succinctly, "Proceed. Let's not wait any longer." Across the company, whispers of her rise spread. Employees discussed the subtle genius of her strategy, the elegance of her execution, and the absolute authority she wielded without arrogance. Even those who had once mocked her now approached with cautious respect, recognizing the precision with which she had orchestrated the takeover. The former billionaire CEO watched, realizing that influence isn't about fear, it's about respect, preparation, and timing. He had thought he controlled the company, but he had only controlled perception. She had controlled reality. That evening, she walked through the office, acknowledging staff quietly, her presence commanding without demanding. Employees smiled nervously, eager to gain approval. She had become the axis around which the company now turned. She paused near a window, gazing at the city skyline. Her mind raced with plans, strategies, and innovations. The empire was hers, but she knew leadership required more than possession. It required vision, wisdom, and continuous execution. A soft tap at her door broke her concentration. It was one of the senior executives. "Ma'am, the international investors want a presentation tomorrow morning. They've heard about the changes and are eager to see your plan." She nodded. "Prepare everything. I want clarity, precision, and confidence. This is our chance to solidify trust and expand influence. Make no mistakes." "Yes, ma'am," he replied, eyes reflecting a mixture of awe and apprehension. She closed her eyes briefly, breathing in the weight of responsibility she had assumed. Every decision from this point forward would shape the company, the employees, and her legacy. But she was ready. More than ready, she was unstoppable. Before the night ended, she sent a brief video message to the camera crew capturing the story. "Remember," she said, voice steady and firm, "strategy, patience, and action can overturn assumptions. If you're watching this, like, comment, and subscribe. The story isn't over, and the next moves are just as crucial as the first." She set down her phone, exhaling slowly. The victory was complete, but the work had only begun. Leadership demanded vigilance, decisiveness, and continuous adaptation. And she, the woman once underestimated, was prepared to meet every challenge. The next morning, the office buzzed with quiet anticipation. Employees whispered as she entered, each step measured, deliberate, commanding attention without raising her voice. She didn't need theatrics. Her presence alone had become the new standard of authority. The former CEO watched from across the room, noting every reaction, every shift in posture, the subtle acknowledgement that she now led not through fear but respect. "Let's begin with department updates," she announced, her voice calm, precise, leaving no room for hesitation. Executives immediately launched into their reports. She listened intently, interjecting with questions that demonstrated not only her understanding of the numbers but also a strategic vision that no one had seen coming. A junior analyst nervously spoke up, "Ma'am, the marketing projections show a potential decline in engagement for next quarter, but our new campaign strategies could offset the risk." She tilted her head slightly, considering. "Explain how the campaigns align with our brand expansion goals. Show me the exact metrics and projected ROI." The analyst fumbled with her tablet but recovered, showing detailed graphs and forecasts. She nodded once approvingly, "Good. I want you to refine these projections and present them to investors tomorrow. Accuracy and clarity are essential." The executives exchanged glances. Every instruction was precise, every expectation clear. There was no confusion, no ambiguity. This was leadership they had never witnessed from anyone in this office, least of all him. The former billionaire CEO approached cautiously. "Do you need me to assist with the investor presentation?" he asked, trying to maintain relevance. She looked at him steadily. "Yes. Your insights are valuable, but remember this. Suggestions only. Final decisions rest with me. Understood. He nodded slowly, realizing the complete shift in authority. It wasn't humiliation, it was clarity. The company needed guidance, not ego, and she was providing it. By midday, she had convened a strategy session specifically for the international expansion project. Investors were nervous. They had heard about the takeover and were skeptical of her experience. But she entered the room with confidence, projecting competence without arrogance. She outlined her plan meticulously: market analyses, risk assessments, potential partnerships, and projected revenue. Every slide, every statement, reinforced not only her knowledge but her control. Questions came fast, testing her limits. How will you handle regulatory changes in emerging markets? One investor asked sharply. We anticipate regulatory shifts and have contingency measures in place, she answered calmly, detailing alternative strategies. Additionally, our partnerships with local advisors ensure compliance and adaptability. We are prepared for multiple scenarios. Another investor leaned forward, skeptical. And what about competition from established local players? She smiled slightly. We leverage agility and insight. Our competitors are slow to adapt because they underestimate the importance of preparation. We have already analyzed their weaknesses and will exploit opportunities responsibly. The investors exchanged impressed glances. Even those who had doubted her leadership now acknowledged that she had earned their trust. She didn't just command attention, she commanded belief. Back at headquarters, her phone buzzed repeatedly. Department heads sent updates. Marketing was realigning campaigns, finance had completed additional forecasts, and logistics had begun preparing for operational expansions. Every action aligned with her vision. She moved through the messages seamlessly, making decisions quickly and efficiently, leaving no room for errors. Later that afternoon, she walked through the production floor. Employees paused, some smiling nervously, others nodding respectfully. She observed quietly, absorbing the rhythm of operations, noticing inefficiencies, anticipating challenges. Her presence alone inspired accountability. Workers who had previously ignored deadlines now approached proactively, presenting ideas rather than excuses. The former CEO followed at a distance, silently observing. Every step she took, every instruction she gave, reinforced a truth he couldn't deny. Influence is not given, it is earned. She had earned it quietly, meticulously, while he had relied on reputation and fear. Ma'am, one production manager said, approaching hesitantly, we've noticed a significant improvement in workflow since yesterday. Employees are responding to the new directives. Good, she said, her tone neutral but satisfied. Ensure consistency and maintain momentum. If anyone resists, address it immediately. I expect results without exception. The manager nodded, almost trembling at the authority she radiated. As evening approached, she returned to her office, the glow of the city skyline casting a reflective light across her desk. Her mind raced, not with triumph but with strategy. The takeover was complete, but leadership was continuous. Every decision, every choice, every interaction mattered. The empire she had acquired needed guidance, structure, and vision. She was prepared for that responsibility. Her phone buzzed once more. A reminder, investor call at 7. She reviewed the final documents carefully, double-checking data, confirming figures, and rehearsing key points. Precision would inspire confidence. Confidence would cement her authority. Before the call, she took a brief moment to record a message for the audience following her story. If you're watching this, remember, preparation, patience, and precision can overturn even the most entrenched assumptions. Like, comment, and subscribe to follow the next steps of this journey. The lessons here go beyond business. They are about life, strategy, and the quiet strength of persistence. She sent the message, then turned her attention back to the call. Investors joined, some skeptical, some curious, all attentive. Her voice was calm, authoritative, and assured. Questions came rapidly, testing her experience and insight. She answered every challenge with clarity, offering solutions that were not only viable but innovative. By the end of the call, even the harshest critics acknowledged her competence. The former CEO listened quietly, awe evident in his expression. He had witnessed countless presentations, countless negotiations, countless displays of authority, but none like this. The woman he had dismissed had transformed herself into the exact leader this company needed. She ended the call, letting silence settle over the room. Satisfaction wasn't in conquest, it was in mastery, in seeing plans executed flawlessly, in knowing that preparation had won over arrogance. For a moment she allowed herself a small smile. Then she looked out over the city. The work ahead was immense, but she was ready. She had turned invisibility into influence, patience into power, and diligence into authority. The company had a new leader, and the world would have to adjust. Her phone buzzed again, a final reminder. Tomorrow's board meeting, global investors report, and departmental updates. She prepared to continue, knowing that leadership was relentless, demanding, and exacting, but she was undaunted. And to the audience watching this story unfold, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. The journey is ongoing, the lessons invaluable, and the story of transformation far from over. The next morning the office felt different. A quiet confidence had settled over the employees, a subtle shift they couldn't quite explain. It wasn't fear, it was respect. Her influence had permeated every department, every hallway, every conversation. People moved with purpose, knowing they were being led by someone who understood both strategy and people. She entered her office, briefly checking her schedule for the day. Investor presentations, departmental reviews, and strategic planning sessions filled every hour, yet she welcomed the workload. This was the responsibility she had fought for, and she intended to execute it flawlessly. A knock at the door pulled her attention. It was one of the senior executives, carrying a tablet with updates from the operations team. "Ma'am, production has hit all key milestones for this week. Efficiency has increased by 12% since yesterday's directives." She nodded, eyes scanning the tablet. "Excellent. Ensure the improvements are sustained and that the staff understands their accountability. Send me daily updates until the processes are fully stabilized." "Yes, ma'am," he replied, the respect in his tone unmistakable. The door opened again and the former CEO stepped in cautiously. I wanted to offer my support. I realize now I misjudged you, and I want to contribute meaningfully to the company." She regarded him calmly. "Your experience is valuable, but respect and trust must be earned, not assumed. Work with the teams, provide guidance, and demonstrate that you understand collaboration and accountability. If you do that, your contributions will be welcome." He nodded, swallowing pride. "Understood." She smiled faintly. "Good. That's all I ask." By late morning, she convened a meeting with the heads of marketing, finance, and operations. "We're entering a critical phase," she began, "and coordination is paramount. I want each department aligned with clear deliverables. Any gaps will be addressed immediately." Questions came rapidly. Marketing asked about campaign timing. Finance raised concerns about cash flow for expansion. Operations queried staffing for new markets. She responded to each inquiry with precise directives and thoughtful reasoning, demonstrating that her authority wasn't arbitrary, it was earned through knowledge, preparation, and insight. The former CEO observed quietly from the back of the room, noting the stark contrast between her approach and his own prior leadership style. She led with clarity, not ego. She commanded attention through competence, not intimidation. Slowly, he began to understand that leadership was not about dominance, it was about execution, foresight, and the ability to inspire trust. After the meeting, she returned to her office. Her assistant entered with a message, "Investor call in 15 minutes. They want your insights on the new international expansion strategy." She nodded, reviewing the prepared notes quickly. "Thank you. Schedule a follow-up immediately afterward with the board to confirm alignment." "Yes, ma'am." The investor call began promptly. Questions were sharp, challenging, and relentless. She answered each with poise, providing detailed explanations, contingency plans, and innovative strategies. Skeptical voices softened as her insight became undeniable. By the end of the call, even the most hesitant investors had expressed confidence in her leadership. She hung up and leaned back, letting the silence settle. Victory wasn't about domination, it was about mastery and preparation. Every step she had taken, quietly, patiently, meticulously, had led to this moment where her authority was indisputable. Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from the operations team. "All teams are aligned, departments updated, and productivity metrics have reached projected targets." She allowed herself a small smile. Not from arrogance, but from satisfaction. She had waited, planned, and executed perfectly. The company was no longer just hers by ownership, it was hers by competence and leadership. Later that afternoon, she walked the office floor, observing employees as they carried out their tasks. She stopped occasionally, acknowledging team members with a nod, a word of encouragement, or a subtle correction. The difference from yesterday was palpable. People were confident, accountable, and engaged. Where once there had been hesitation and fear, there was now trust and respect. The former CEO approached quietly, his expression tentative. "You've changed everything. Even the way people see me, see themselves." She looked at him steadily. Leadership isn't about status or fear. It's about action, consistency, and vision. Respect is earned when people know that decisions are fair, intelligent, and purposeful. You will understand this fully if you observe, learn, and contribute constructively. He nodded slowly. "I will. I want to learn. I need to learn." "Good," she said. "We can rebuild trust. But it starts with humility and accountability. Everything else follows." As evening fell, she returned to her office, reviewing plans for global expansion, employee engagement initiatives, and strategic partnerships. Each decision was deliberate, ensuring that momentum would continue without disruption. She knew that true leadership wasn't a single moment of triumph. It was sustained performance, vigilance, and the ability to adapt. She glanced at the camera crew, still capturing her story. "Remember," she said, voice calm but firm, "if you're following this journey, like, comment, and subscribe. What you've seen today is more than a takeover. It's strategy, patience, and precision in action. These lessons apply to business, life, and every challenge you face. The next phase is just beginning." Her gaze returned to the city skyline. The empire she had quietly prepared for was now fully under her guidance. Every department aligned, every investor confident, and every executive, once skeptical, recognized her authority. She had turned invisibility into influence, patience into power, and meticulous planning into absolute control. The former CEO watched from a distance, recognizing the undeniable truth. She had not only taken the company but had transformed it into something stronger, more efficient, and more resilient than he could have imagined. She allowed herself a moment of reflection, knowing the journey wasn't over. Leadership demanded continuous effort, unwavering focus, and relentless execution. But she was ready. Every decision, every action, every choice moving forward would reinforce her authority and ensure the company's success. And somewhere deep in her mind she knew her story, was far from over. By the next morning the entire company seemed to hum differently. Where once the air was thick with hesitation and doubt, there was now a quiet energy, a sense of purpose that followed her wherever she went. Employees anticipated her presence, adjusted their work in alignment with her expectations, and carried themselves with a newfound confidence. She walked through the open-plan office, pausing occasionally to observe, to acknowledge, to correct. Each interaction reinforced her authority without a single raised voice. Employees were learning quickly that competence and clarity demanded respect. The former CEO trailed behind, careful not to interrupt, careful not to misstep. "Ma'am," a junior executive approached nervously, "we've finalized the schedule for the international expansion teams. All resources have been allocated, and preliminary projections suggest a smooth rollout." She glanced at the documents, scanning figures and timelines. "Excellent. Ensure that each team leader conducts a daily check-in with their units. Any deviation from the plan must be reported immediately. Precision and accountability are non-negotiable." "Yes, ma'am," he replied, relief evident in his tone. Her attention shifted briefly to the former CEO. "I want you to mentor the senior expansion managers. Guide them where necessary, but remember, final decisions rest with me." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Understood." "Good," she said, her tone neutral, almost gentle. "You'll find that collaboration is more rewarding than authority alone." By mid-morning, she convened a cross-departmental strategy meeting. Executives from finance, operations, marketing, and logistics gathered around a polished table, each aware of the stakes. Investors were watching closely, analysts scrutinizing every move, and the board expected nothing less than perfection. She began with the financial update. "Revenue projections for the next quarter are on track, but we must optimize cash flow for the expansion. Finance, outline contingency measures for potential fluctuations." The CFO spoke quickly, detailing alternative funding strategies and risk mitigation plans. She listened carefully, occasionally interjecting with clarifying questions, ensuring the entire team understood both the reasoning and implications of every decision. Operations and logistics followed, presenting staffing schedules, supply chain adjustments, and operational milestones. She nodded, approved, and suggested refinements where necessary. Her leadership wasn't domineering, it was methodical, strategic, and precise. The former CEO watched silently from the back, impressed despite himself. Every question she asked, every directive she issued, reinforced the reality he had struggled to accept. She was in control and she knew exactly what she was doing. Later, she led the investor presentation via video conference. Skepticism was palpable in the opening moments, but her confidence and mastery of detail quickly shifted perception. She outlined market opportunities, risk management strategies, and long-term growth projections with unwavering clarity. One investor asked sharply, "How do you plan to compete with established local companies who dominate these markets?" She leaned forward slightly, her voice steady. "By understanding their operations, anticipating their weaknesses, and leveraging our agility. Competition is inevitable, but preparation is key. We are prepared for multiple scenarios, and our teams are trained to adapt quickly and effectively." Another investor queried potential regulatory hurdles. She responded with precise strategies, legal frameworks, and preemptive solutions. By the end of the call, doubts had evaporated. Her authority and insight were unquestionable. Even the harshest critics acknowledged her competence. Back at headquarters, she walked through the departments again, observing quietly. Employees who had once hesitated now approached with questions and ideas. They presented solutions rather than problems, demonstrating a culture shift that only true leadership could inspire. The former CEO followed at a distance, silently noting the transformation. Leadership, he realized, wasn't about ego or past achievements. It was about execution, insight, and the ability to inspire trust and respect. She had accomplished all of these effortlessly. "Ma'am," a department head said tentatively, "the teams are responding well to the new directives. Productivity has increased, and morale is higher than it's been in months." "Good," she replied, her tone calm but firm. "Keep monitoring. Ensure this momentum is sustained and any issues are addressed immediately. Consistency is key." Evening arrived and she returned to her office. Her mind was still active, reviewing documents, responding to messages, and planning next steps. The empire she had meticulously prepared for was now fully under her control. Every department aligned, every investor confident, and every employee operating efficiently. She allowed herself a brief smile. Not from arrogance, but from the satisfaction of seeing strategy, patience, and preparation translate into undeniable authority. She had turned invisibility into influence, patience into power, and meticulous planning into mastery. Her phone buzzed, a reminder for tomorrow's board meeting, global expansion briefing, and investor follow-ups. She prepared calmly, knowing that leadership demanded vigilance and continuous execution. Before ending the day, she recorded another message for the audience. If you've been following this story, remember, strategy, patience, and preparation can overcome even the greatest obstacles. Like, comment, and subscribe to see the next steps in this journey. Leadership is continuous and the lessons are invaluable. She set her phone aside and looked out at the city skyline. The company was hers, not just by ownership but by leadership, vision, and execution. And she knew that the challenges ahead, though immense, were within her ability to conquer. The former CEO observed silently from the doorway, understanding fully for the first time that influence is not demanded. It is earned through competence, preparation, and unwavering execution. She leaned back in her chair, allowing a brief moment of reflection. The story of her rise, her patience, and her mastery was only beginning. And somewhere deep in her mind she smiled, knowing that she had secured not just control, but the respect, trust, and loyalty necessary to lead an empire successfully. The following morning she arrived at the office early, long before most employees. The quiet hum of the city outside contrasted with the electric energy she felt inside. Today was critical. She would meet with key department heads to finalize operational strategies for the international expansion. She reviewed notes, double-checked forecasts, and ensured every contingency plan was accounted for. Nothing could be left to chance. As she entered the conference room, executives were already seated, awaiting her direction. She didn't need to announce herself. Her presence alone demanded attention. She gave a subtle nod, signaling the meeting to begin. "Good morning," she said, calm yet commanding. "Today we finalize our strategy. Every department must present clear action plans, timelines, and potential risks. Gaps will be addressed immediately. Marketing was first. Ma'am, our campaigns have been redesigned for international markets. Social engagement metrics suggest strong initial traction, but localized messaging may need adjustments based on cultural insights." She leaned forward, fingers steepled. "Show me the detailed projections for each market. Highlight where engagement might lag and propose mitigation strategies. I want clarity, not assumptions." Marketing shuffled papers, then presented projections and refined tactics. She listened, asked targeted questions and provided succinct guidance. Executives left the meeting with precise instructions, the kind of clarity that demanded both accountability and efficiency. Finance followed. "Ma'am, projected expenditures for the next quarter have been revised based on updated logistics and operational costs. Contingency reserves are adequate, but certain regions present higher risk due to currency fluctuations and regulatory uncertainty." She nodded, eyes scanning the figures. "Outline risk mitigation measures for each scenario. Prepare a financial briefing for investors emphasizing preparedness, not just opportunity. Confidence stems from certainty." Operations presented last, detailing staffing allocations, supply chain adjustments and infrastructure readiness. She reviewed each plan meticulously, approving necessary changes while highlighting areas for refinement. Every decision was intentional, every instruction precise. Throughout the meeting, the former CEO observed quietly. He was no longer the center of attention. He watched, fascinated and humbled, as she navigated complex issues with grace, authority, and an intuitive understanding of people and processes alike. After the meeting, she addressed him directly. "I want you to oversee mentoring for the expansion teams. Guide them where necessary, but remember, ultimate decisions remain with me. This is an opportunity to regain trust through action, not authority." He nodded slowly. "I understand." "Good. Watch, learn, and contribute. That is how influence is rebuilt," she said. Later that day, she led a video call with global investors. Skepticism was evident in the opening moments, but she exuded calm authority. Her presentation was thorough, precise, and grounded in data. She addressed potential concerns with preemptive strategies, turning doubts into confidence. "How will you handle regulatory changes in emerging markets?" one investor asked sharply. "We anticipate regulatory challenges and have structured contingency plans accordingly," she replied confidently. "Local legal advisors have been engaged, and our teams are trained to adapt quickly to evolving conditions. Preparedness is our advantage." Another investor raised concerns about competition. She responded, "We leverage agility, insight, and operational excellence. Competitors are slow to adapt because they underestimate the importance of strategic preparation. We act decisively while mitigating risk." By the end of the call, investors were impressed, their doubts replaced with trust. Even the harshest critics had recognized her competence. Back at the office, she walked the floor, observing teams executing her directives. Employees moved with precision and confidence, presenting updates and solutions proactively. Where fear had once silenced ideas, respect now inspired initiative. The former CEO approached quietly. "You've changed everything," he said, his voice subdued. "Even the way people interact. They listen but they also respect. That's something I never achieved." She looked at him steadily. "Leadership isn't about being feared. It's about creating a culture where people understand the vision, trust the decisions and take ownership of outcomes. Respect is earned, not demanded." He nodded slowly, absorbing the lesson, humbled by her mastery. "Remember," she continued, "authority without preparation and clarity is meaningless. Confidence stems from mastery, and mastery requires patience, planning, and consistent execution. That is what separates leaders from managers." He swallowed hard. "I see that now." She allowed a faint smile. "Good. Observation is the first step toward growth." Evening arrived and she returned to her office. The city lights reflected on the glass walls, but her focus remained on the tasks ahead. Emails, reports, and strategic decisions demanded her attention. She reviewed every department's progress, checked investor updates, and prepared for the next day's board meeting. Her phone buzzed, a reminder to record an update for the audience. She spoke clearly and directly. "If you've been following this journey, remember, patience, strategy, and preparation can overturn even the most entrenched assumptions. Like, comment, and subscribe to follow the next moves in this story. The lessons here extend beyond business. They apply to life, persistence, and mastering your circumstances." She set the phone aside, exhaling slowly. The company was no longer just hers in name. It was hers in execution, in vision, and in authority. Every employee, every department, and every investor acknowledged her leadership. She had taken invisibility and turned it into undeniable influence. The former CEO watched from the doorway, silent but contemplative. He realized fully that leadership is not claimed, it is demonstrated through competence, insight, and the ability to inspire trust. She had done all of this effortlessly, and the lessons would remain with him forever. She allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. The journey was far from over, but she had established control, trust, and clarity. Every next step would build on this foundation, ensuring the empire not only survived the transition but thrived under her guidance. And deep in her mind, she smiled, knowing that she had not only won the company but had also transformed it into a stronger, more efficient and resilient organization than it had ever been before. The following morning, the office was alive with quiet confidence. Teams moved efficiently, decisions were executed without hesitation, and the once tense corridors now carried an air of purpose. She walked through, observing, acknowledging, and guiding where needed. Every employee had internalized the new rhythm, responding not out of fear but respect and clarity. The former CEO approached her cautiously. "Ma'am, I want to thank you. I've seen what leadership truly is, and I've learned more in these days than I ever realized." She looked at him, eyes steady. Experience alone isn't enough. Leadership requires preparation, patience, vision, and execution. You can contribute meaningfully, but it must come through action, not authority. Understand? He nodded, humbled. "I do. I will follow your lead and prove my value." She allowed a small smile. "Good. That's how trust is rebuilt." Later that day, she convened the full board for a final review of the company's transformation. Investors attended virtually, executives filled the room, and employees watched the progress updates streaming from each department. She began, calm and composed, presenting financial reports, operational successes, and the results of her restructuring initiatives. "Revenue projections are exceeding expectations," she said. "Productivity has increased across all departments. Our international expansion plan is fully prepared, with contingency measures in place for all foreseeable challenges. Every team is aligned, every process accounted for, and every stakeholder informed." Investors asked questions, probing for weaknesses, testing the plans. She responded to each confidently, demonstrating not only mastery of data but also an understanding of people, processes, and risk. By the end of the session, all doubts had been erased. Confidence in her leadership was unanimous. After the board meeting, she walked through the office one last time before the day ended. Employees greeted her with smiles, nods, and quiet acknowledgments. Where hesitation and fear had once prevailed, there was now trust, initiative, and loyalty. She had not only assumed control, she had inspired it. The former CEO watched silently from a distance. He had expected confrontation, perhaps resentment, but instead he saw transformation. He had underestimated her once, and she had demonstrated that influence is earned, not claimed. She paused near the window, gazing at the city skyline. The lights reflected on the glass, but her focus remained sharp. Leadership was continuous. The empire she now guided would require vigilance, wisdom, and unwavering execution. But she was ready. More than ready, she was unstoppable. Her phone buzzed once more. She turned to it and recorded a final message for the audience. If you've been following this story, remember, patience, strategy, and preparation can overturn the greatest assumptions. Like, comment, and subscribe to follow the journey and learn from the lessons of leadership, resilience, and persistence. True influence is earned, not given, and the results speak for themselves. She ended the recording, letting the silence settle over the office. The company was hers, not just in name but in vision, execution, and authority. Every department aligned, every investor reassured, and every employee inspired. Her quiet, methodical rise had transformed the company into a stronger, more cohesive, and unstoppable force. The former CEO approached one final time. I see now. You've earned this. Not just the company but respect, loyalty, and trust." She looked at him evenly. "Yes. And now the future depends on execution. Every day matters, every decision counts. Lead with action, not ego, and the results will follow." He nodded, a mixture of humility and admiration on his face. She turned back toward her office, confident, calm, and fully aware of the empire she had created, not through force or arrogance but through strategy, patience, and unwavering execution. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that while this chapter had ended, the true story of influence, power, and mastery, was only beginning. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Follow the journey to see how strategy, patience, and leadership can change the impossible into reality.